Chioma's hands trembled as she signed the discharge papers at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. 3 days ago, she'd collapsed at her laboratory workstation, and the doctors had discovered what she'd been denying for weeks. She was 4 months pregnant. The father? A man whose face haunted her dreams, but whose real name she'd never learned. A man she'd spent one desperate night with in Seoul before fleeing back to Nigeria. But we need to start from the beginning. 8 months earlier, Chioma had been sitting in a cramped immigration office at Incheon International Airport, watching her dream unravel in real time. The research grant that brought her to Korea, a prestigious position studying fermentation technology at Seoul National University, had been revoked. Budget cuts, they said. The Korean professor who'd sponsored her visa looked genuinely apologetic through the video call, but apologies didn't pay rent or buy plane tickets home. "You have 72 hours to secure alternative sponsorship or leave the country," the immigration officer said in clipped English, stamping her passport with brutal finality. Chioma walked out of that office into the chaos of Seoul with exactly 340,000 won in her pocket, roughly $300, and nowhere to go. Her student dormitory had already been reassigned. Her return flight wasn't for another 6 weeks, and changing it would cost more than she had. She found herself in Hongdae, the university district, where a Nigerian student she'd met online let her crash on his floor for a few nights. "There's a Korean BBQ place in Gangnam that hires foreigners under the table," he told her. "Owner's name is Mr. Cho. Tell him Daniel sent you." The job was brutal. 12-hour shifts, standing over smoking grills, the smell of charred meat seeping into her skin and hair. But it was money, and money meant survival. She worked there for 3 weeks, saving every one she could, planning her escape back to Lagos where at least failure would be in a familiar language. Then came the night that changed everything. A group of businessmen had reserved the private VIP section. 6 men who carried themselves with the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no. Chioma was assigned to their room, grilling meat at their table while they conducted business in rapid Korean she couldn't follow. Everything was fine until one of them, drunk on soju and power, decided she was part of the entertainment. "You," he said in broken English, pointing at her. "You know African dance? Show us." Chioma kept her eyes on the grill. "I'm here to cook, sir." "I pay good money for this room. You dance or you get out." The other men laughed. One of them stood up, turned on music from his phone, some K-pop song, and grabbed her wrist, trying to pull her away from the grill. She jerked back instinctively, and her elbow caught the edge of the soju bottle pyramid they'd built on the table. Glass exploded everywhere. Expensive soju, the premium kind that cost 50,000 won per bottle, flooded across the table and onto the lap of the man who'd grabbed her. The room went silent. "Do you know how much you just cost me?" The man's voice was deadly quiet. He stood slowly, soju dripping from his designer pants. "That's 300,000 won, plus my pants, another 2 million won. You're going to pay for this." "It was an accident. I don't care. You pay or I call immigration. I'm sure they'd love to know about the illegal worker at Mr. Cho's restaurant." Chioma's blood ran cold. Mr. Cho appeared in the doorway, his face pale with terror. These weren't ordinary customers. "Please, gentlemen, we'll comp your entire evening." "Not enough." The man pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police right now unless she pays. Tonight, Chioma's entire savings was 280,000 won. Not even close. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then I guess you're going to jail." "Unless." He smiled, and it was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen. "Unless you make it up to us another way. There's a love motel next door. You spend the night entertaining us, we forget this ever happened." The room spun. The other men were grinning now, sensing blood in the water. Mr. Cho had disappeared, self-preservation trumping any loyalty to his illegal employee. "I'd rather go to jail," Chioma said quietly. "Suit yourself." The man started dialing. Chioma bolted. She crashed through the restaurant's back exit into an alley, her chef's apron still on, the smell of smoke and meat clinging to her clothes. Behind her, she heard shouting. They were following. Panic drove her legs faster, turning down random streets in a neighborhood she barely knew. The sky opened up. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking her within seconds. She ran blindly, her shoes slipping on wet pavement, until she found herself in a quiet residential area. Up ahead, she saw a traditional Hanok house with warm light spilling from its windows and a covered wooden porch. Without thinking, she ran up the steps and pounded on the door. It opened almost immediately. The man who stood there was perhaps the most beautiful human being she'd ever seen. Tall, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He wore a simple black shirt and dark jeans, and there was something dangerous in the casual way he held himself, like a blade at rest. "Help me!" Chioma gasped in English. "Please, there are men." He glanced past her at the empty street, then back at her soaked, trembling form. "How much trouble are you in?" "A lot. I broke expensive bottles. They want money I don't have. They threatened to call immigration." Immigration. He said it like he was tasting the word. "So you're here illegally." She nodded, water dripping from her hair. He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." The house was beautiful inside. Minimalist, expensive, with art on the walls that even Chioma's untrained eye recognized as valuable. He led her to a bathroom and handed her a towel and a change of clothes, an oversized shirt and sweatpants. "Dry off. We'll talk after." When she emerged, he was sitting in the living room with 2 glasses of tea. He gestured for her to sit. "My name is Jae-sung," he said. "And you are?" "Chioma." "Chioma from Nigeria, working illegally in Seoul, running from men who want money or worse." He sipped his tea. "Interesting night. I'm sorry for bringing trouble to your door." "I didn't say I minded." His smile was slight, enigmatic. "Tell me something. If you could fix this situation, what would that look like?" "I'd go home, back to Lagos, start over." "A plane ticket and enough money to restart. That's what you need." He set down his tea. "I can give you that." Hope flared in her chest. "Why would you help me?" "Because I can. Because I'm bored. Because you look like you fought hard to survive, and I respect that." He leaned forward slightly. "But I don't do charity, Chioma." "Everything has a price." Her hope curdled into something else. "What price?" "Stay with me tonight." "Not as a transaction. I won't touch you unless you want me to. Just stay. Keep me company. Be honest with me. And in the morning, I'll give you enough money to go home and start fresh." "That's it? Just talk?" "Just talk. Unless you want more." His eyes held hers. "I'm giving you a choice. Real choice. You can leave right now. Try your luck with those men in immigration. Or you can stay. We'll talk through the night, and tomorrow you'll have your escape." Chioma looked at this strange, beautiful man in his expensive house and tried to read his intentions. There was danger here. She could feel it. But also something like honesty. He wasn't pretending to be a savior. He was offering a deal. "Just talking," she said carefully. "That's all. That's all I'm asking for right now." They talked for hours. He asked about her life in Lagos, her family, her dreams of being a food scientist, her hopes of combining Nigerian and Korean fermentation techniques. She asked about his life, and he gave careful answers that revealed almost nothing concrete. He worked in import-export. He'd inherited this house. He enjoyed art and silence. Somewhere around 2 a.m., after more tea and surprisingly easy conversation, something shifted. He told her about losing his brother to gang violence when they were teenagers. She told him about her father dying when she was 12, leaving her mother to raise 4 children alone. "You're stronger than you know," he said quietly. "You say that like strength is a choice." It is. Every single day. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. When he leaned in to kiss her, Chioma didn't pull away. When his hands found her waist, she moved closer. What began as loneliness and exhaustion transformed into something more, a connection forged in vulnerability and midnight honesty. They moved to his bedroom, and the night unfolded with surprising tenderness. He was patient, attentive, present in a way that made her feel seen rather than used. Afterward, lying in the dark, he said, "You'll leave tomorrow and forget this happened." "Will you forget?" "No." His voice was quiet. "I don't think I will." When dawn broke, she woke to find him already dressed, sitting by the window. On the nightstand was an envelope. 5,000,001, he said without turning around. Enough for a flight, enough to restart, and this. He handed her a business card with only a phone number. If you ever need help, real help, call. Who are you really? She asked. He smiled, sad, knowing. Someone you're better off not knowing. Chioma took the money and the card. At the door, she turned back. Thank you, Jae-sung. Survive, Chioma. Thrive. Prove that tonight mattered. She flew home 3 days later, carrying a secret she didn't yet know. His child, growing inside her. Back in Lagos, Chioma threw herself into rebuilding. She used the money to start a small fermentation lab in her family compound in Surulere, producing artisanal kimchi adapted to Nigerian tastes. Against all odds, it caught on. Within months, she was supplying restaurants across Lagos. Then she discovered the pregnancy. 4 months along, hidden by stress and denial. She thought about calling the number he'd given her 100 times, but never did. What would she say? Remember me? I'm carrying your child? He'd been clear. That night was a moment outside of time, not the beginning of something. She named her daughter Amaka and raised her alone, building her business into something real. Her kimchi became famous, and she expanded into other fermented foods, exactly as she'd dreamed. 2 years passed. Then one afternoon, a black SUV pulled up to her lab. A Korean man in a suit stepped out and asked in perfect English, "Are you Chioma Okafor?" Her blood went cold. Who's asking? Someone who's been looking for you for a very long time. Jae-sung stepped out of the vehicle, older but unmistakably him. Their eyes met across the dusty Lagos street, and everything came rushing back. You disappeared, he said simply. You told me to... I know. He looked at the lab, the sign with her name, the workers moving inside. You did it. You survived. You thrived. Why are you here? Because I couldn't forget. Because I've spent 2 years trying to and failing. He took a step closer. Because that night mattered, and I need to know if it mattered to you too. Chioma's hands were shaking. It's complicated. Show me complicated. She led him inside, past the fermentation tanks and packaging stations, to the small office where Amaka sat coloring at a children's table. The little girl looked up with curious eyes, her father's eyes. Jae-sung froze. Understanding washed over his face like a wave. She's... yours. Yes. He crouched slowly in front of Amaka, studying her face with something like wonder. What's her name? Amaka. It means beautiful or good. It fits. His voice cracked slightly. Why didn't you call? Because you gave me freedom that night, real freedom. Calling you would have felt like taking it back. Chioma sat down heavily. You don't owe us anything, Jae-sung. That was never the deal. He looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. What if I want to owe you something? What if I want to be more than a one-night stranger? You don't even know me, not really. Then let me learn. He stood moving closer. I'll relocate here. Open a business. Be present. Not as obligation, as choice. The same way you chose to stay that night. Chioma looked at this impossible man, at her daughter playing obliviously between them, at the life she'd built from ashes and determination. It won't be easy. I won't be easy. Good. I don't trust easy things. They didn't fall into each other's arms. They didn't promise forever. But that afternoon, Jae-sung sat on the floor and colored with his daughter while Chioma worked, and it felt like the beginning of something real. Something chosen, not desperate. Something built on honesty instead of fantasy. 3 months later, Jae-sung opened an import business in Lagos, shuttling between Korea and Nigeria, learning Yoruba and Hausa phrases, eating jollof rice, being present in Amaka's life with surprising dedication. He and Chioma dated slowly, carefully, 2 people learning who the other was beyond one desperate night. They never married. Marriage felt too conventional, too expected. Instead, they built something stranger and truer, a partnership across continents, a family forged from survival and choice, a love that began in desperation but grew into something fierce and free. Years later, when Amaka asked how her parents met, Chioma told her the truth, a complicated, imperfect story about rain and running, about choices made in impossible moments, about how sometimes the worst nights lead to the best mornings. A message worth remembering. Not every love story ends in marriage. Not every family follows traditional paths. Sometimes the most powerful endings are the ones where people choose each other daily, building something real from broken pieces. Love isn't about perfect beginnings or fairy tale endings. It's about showing up, being honest, and choosing connection even when it's complicated. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to know that their unconventional path is just as valid, just as beautiful.